I never believed in haunted places. Not really. Ghost stories were something I used to laugh at, tales told around campfires by people who'd had too much to drink or too little sleep. But that was before Alaska. Before I spent one night in those mountains. It started when I took a solo trip north, trying to escape the noise of the world. I'd been feeling off lately. Disconnected. A kind of heavy silence sitting in my chest. So when I found a listing online for a secluded cabin deep in the Talkeetna Mountains, one with no phone service, no neighbors, no distractions, I thought it was perfect. The old man at the gas station didn't agree. He was refilling my tank when I mentioned where I was heading. His hands froze, and he glanced up slowly. "You mean Black Ridge Hollow?" "Yeah," I said. "About 20 miles past that sign." He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. "Don't stay there after dark," he said finally. "You hear anything calling your name, don't answer." I laughed it off. Everyone up here had stories. He didn't laugh back. By the time I reached the base of the trail, the sun was already sinking behind the jagged peaks. The snow caught the last of the light and burned orange like embers. My breath fogged the air as I hauled my backpack onto my shoulders and started the climb. Every crunch of my boots echoed too long. It was the kind of quiet that presses on your ears, not peaceful, but watchful. Halfway up, I found the first sign. A rusted metal plaque, nailed to a tree and barely readable through layers of ice. It said only, "Do not remain overnight." I stared at it for a while, my breath rising like smoke. It had to be a joke, some local prank to scare tourists. But as the wind rose through the trees, I noticed something strange. The air felt thicker. Like the forest itself was holding its breath. By the time I reached the cabin, it was full dark. A small wooden structure half buried in snow, with a roof bowed under decades of ice. There was an old generator out back and a single window that reflected my flashlight like a blind eye. Inside, it was even colder. Dust floated in the beam of my light, slow and heavy. There were boots by the door, frozen stiff, like someone had left them mid-step. On the table, I found a journal. Leather-bound. Old. The first page was dated 1987. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. "It's outside again." The whispering. That's where it ended. I set it down and told myself it was just some old trapper's diary. But a chill crawled down my back that had nothing to do with the cold. Because for a second, I thought I heard it too. Something faint. Something whispering my name through the walls. At first, I told myself the whisper was just the wind. Alaska has a way of playing tricks on you. The air moves through the trees and the snow like it's alive, it hums, it sighs, it speaks. But the thing about that sound in the cabin was, it wasn't outside. It was coming from within the walls. I tried to shake it off. I lit the old lantern, unrolled my sleeping bag near the wood stove, and told myself I'd laugh about this in the morning. The wind scraped at the roof like claws, and the old timbers groaned under the cold. But then came the tapping. Soft. Rhythmic. Like fingernails against wood. Once every few seconds. From beneath the floorboards. I held my breath and listened. Tap. Tap. Pause. Tap tap. It wasn't random, it sounded like communication. Like someone responding. I slammed my boot down hard on the floor. The tapping stopped. Silence swallowed the cabin. And that was somehow worse. I crawled into my sleeping bag and pulled it tight around me. The lantern flickered, casting shadows that stretched too long on the walls. I watched the flame dance until my eyelids grew heavy. At some point, I must have drifted off. But I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow. Careful. Crunching snow outside the door. I froze. The footsteps stopped too right outside. Then something brushed the window. Not a hand. Not quite. The frost shimmered and melted where it touched, as if something warm was pressing from the outside. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Then a whisper right by the glass. You shouldn't be here. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure it could hear it. I lunged for the lantern, but it went out the moment my fingers touched it. The cabin was swallowed by darkness. That's when I saw it, faintly glowing shapes outside. Not headlights. Not flashlights. Figures. Moving slow through the snow, pale and flickering like they were made of the northern lights themselves. There were 3 of them. Maybe 4. They didn't walk. They drifted. I scrambled for my flashlight, but when I turned it on, the window was empty again. The snow was untouched. No footprints. I stayed awake the rest of the night, too scared to blink. Every creak of the cabin felt closer, every whisper sounded more like words. And at some point, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The journal. The one I'd left on the table. It was open again. A new line written beneath the last unfinished sentence. It knows your name now. When the gray light of morning finally seeped through the window, I thought I'd survived the worst of it. But Alaska has a way of tricking you, making you believe the night is over when the real darkness is still waiting. I didn't sleep. My head pounded, my throat was dry, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself I'd hike down as soon as the sun was high enough to see the trail. But first, I needed to know what I was dealing with. The journal. That line, it knows your name now. Someone had written that. But who? I flipped back through the pages. Most of it was normal at first, notes about snow conditions, trapping routes, complaints about the cold. But around February, the tone changed. The miners heard voices again near the shaft. We found another set of footprints today. Small. Barefoot. No one would survive out there barefoot. They keep calling to us from under the ice. The last few pages were nearly unreadable, smeared with dirt and something darker. But one entry stood out. The hollow under Blackridge isn't rock. It's a mouth. I dropped the book. My hands were sweating despite the freezing air. A mouth? What did that even mean? I decided to check behind the cabin where the old generator sat half buried in snow. Maybe I'd find some logical explanation. But when I got there, I noticed something strange, a circle of stones behind the cabin. Perfectly round. Each one carved with crude markings. The snow inside the circle hadn't melted, but it hadn't frozen either. It was untouched, like the storm had gone around it. I leaned closer and felt it, a faint vibration beneath the snow. Like something breathing. That's when I heard the click. It came from the edge of the trees. A camera shutter. I turned fast. No one there. Just endless white and shadow. But I swear I saw movement, a figure ducking behind a pine. Tall. Wrapped in furs that hung wrong on its body. I called out, "Hey! Who's there?" No answer. Only the wind. Then, faintly, from the trees, that same voice from the night before. You shouldn't be here. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't wind. It was closer. I backed away, nearly tripping over the stones. My breath was coming fast, clouds of vapor twisting in front of me. I stumbled back into the cabin and slammed the door shut. And that's when I noticed something that turned my stomach to ice. The floor. The tapping was back. But this time, the boards were moving. Slowly. Rising. As if something beneath them was trying to push its way out. The journal flipped open on its own. Pages fluttering until it stopped on a single line written in a shaky hand. It feeds when you're alone. I stumbled back toward the door, ready to run, but the wind outside wasn't howling anymore. It was calling my name. Softly. Over and over. And then, in a voice that sounded almost like mine, it whispered back through the wood. Come down here. The sound of the wind changed again that night. It wasn't howling anymore, it was breathing. Long, drawn-out sighs swept through the valley, like something enormous exhaling over and over again. When I opened my eyes, the lantern was flickering on its last bit of fuel. The cabin looked distorted, like the walls were breathing too. I sat up, every muscle in my back screaming, and for a moment I thought I saw someone standing near the door. It was just a shadow. I told myself that. Just a shadow. But when I blinked, the shape moved. Slowly. Like it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. I reached for my flashlight, but the beam sputtered weakly and died. The batteries were fresh. I knew they were fresh. Then the whispering began again, clearer this time. Not just murmurs through the walls, but actual words, though faint and broken by the wind. Leave, before it takes you too. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I stumbled toward the door, grabbed it, and yanked it open only to be met by a blinding white storm. Snow whipped against my face so hard it stung. But through the haze, I saw something. A figure standing still out there in the snow. Pale, almost blending in with the storm. It wasn't moving toward me. It was watching. And even from that distance, I could tell it had no face. I slammed the door and backed away, breathing hard. The cabin groaned, wood snapping somewhere deep within the structure, like the mountain itself was twisting. Then something knocked, 3 slow knocks, on the other side of the door. Not frantic. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. Knock. 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 The whisper followed, closer now, so close it sounded like it came from just behind my ear. You shouldn't have come. The lantern went out. I stood in absolute darkness, frozen, afraid to move. And then, somewhere behind me, I heard the soft crunch of snow. Inside the cabin. I turned slowly, trembling, and saw faint white footprints forming on the wooden floor. One after another, leading straight toward me. That was when I realized the door was still locked. The thing was already inside. The air in the cabin turned frigid, colder than the storm outside. I could see my breath spilling out in quick, shallow bursts, each one glowing faintly blue in the dark. The sound of those footsteps, the crunching snow inside the cabin, echoed louder now, deliberate, circling. I backed away until I hit the far wall. My fingertips brushed something hanging there, the lantern hook. I grabbed the lantern, shaking it desperately until a weak flame flickered to life. And in that dim orange glow, I saw it. A trail of wet footprints stretched across the wooden floor, but they didn't belong to any human. The prints were elongated, like a person had walked barefoot but with fingers instead of toes. Long, bony, jointed things that left a faint smear of ice with every step. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice out in a hoarse whisper. Who's there? No answer. Only the slow drip of melting frost from the ceiling and that same whispering voice again, rising and falling like a prayer caught in the wind. The ice remembers. The words came from beneath me. I dropped the lantern, which clattered to the floor, spilling flickering light through the cracks in the planks. For a split second, I saw movement below, something dark writhing under the floorboards, pressing upward like something trapped was trying to break free. The boards creaked, bending under invisible weight. Then, crack, one split open. I stumbled back just as a hand, white, skeletal, rimed with frost, pushed through the gap. It clawed at the air, the fingers impossibly long, twitching like the last motion of a dying thing. My instincts took over. I kicked the lantern toward it. The flame burst upward, catching the boards. A guttural scream erupted from below, muffled yet so piercing it rattled my skull. It wasn't the cry of something human. It was the mountain itself screaming. I ran to the door, yanked it open, and bolted into the storm. Snow blinded me instantly, whipping my face raw, but I didn't stop. The forest line blurred. My lungs burned. Somewhere behind me, the cabin groaned and then collapsed inward like the earth had swallowed it whole. But even over the howling wind, I heard it again. That voice. Right behind me. You woke it. I turned. Nothing. Just the storm. Then I saw them, figures, faint and distant, emerging from the snow one by one. Dozens of them. All pale. All silent. Some crawling, some standing perfectly still. Their heads tilted in unison, all facing me. And beneath their feet, the snow began to move. It rippled, like something enormous was shifting just below the surface. That was when I realized. Those weren't spirits. They were the ones who stayed too long. The mountain didn't just haunt people, it kept them. I don't remember how long I ran. Time dissolved into the white. The storm had swallowed everything, the trees, the sky, even sound itself. I could only hear my breathing and the snow crunching under my boots. But every few seconds, I heard something else behind me. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. They were following me. The pale figures I'd seen through the storm weren't fading, they were keeping pace. No matter how fast I moved, they never fell behind. Their outlines flickered in and out of the blizzard, faces blank, eyes dark pits of nothing. When I finally stumbled into a clearing, my knees gave out. I fell forward, gasping, the cold biting through my clothes like 1,000 needles. That's when I saw it, something jutting out of the snow ahead of me. A black shape, smooth and curved, like stone. But as I brushed the frost away, I realized it wasn't rock. It was ice. And inside it, frozen mid-screen, was a human face. Then another. And another. An entire wall of translucent ice stretched before me, and within it were dozens, maybe hundreds, of bodies. Men, women, children, all preserved perfectly in the glacier. Their mouths open as if they had died screaming. But there was something worse. Their eyes were moving. I stumbled back in horror as a low, vibrating hum began to build in the air. The sound wasn't coming from the storm, it was coming from the ice. It was singing. Dozens of voices whispering, moaning, crying rose together in a haunting, rhythmic chant that echoed through the valley. It was the same sound I'd heard since I arrived, the same cadence that haunted the wind. The mountain was alive. And this was its choir. The snow around me began to sink, slowly at first, then faster. I looked down and saw my boots disappearing beneath the surface. The ground had turned soft, slush-like, sucking me down. I fought to pull free, clawing at the snow, but the ice below me cracked and a blinding blue light shone up through the fissures. The chanting grew louder, words now shaping through the frozen wails. Join us. My legs were buried to the knees. The cold burned through my bones. I screamed and tore myself free, falling backward, crawling through the snow until my fingers bled. The light faded, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed me into the woods, growing quieter, softer, as if whispering their disappointment. When I finally reached the base of the mountain, dawn was breaking. The storm had stopped. The world was silent again. I looked back. And there was nothing. No cabin. No figures. No wall of ice. Just the pristine, untouched snow. But when the sun hit the mountain's peak, I saw something glint. Hundreds of faint, ice-blue shapes beneath the surface, faces stretching on for miles. The frozen choir had gone quiet, but it was still there. Waiting. By the time I made it back to the ranger's outpost, the sun was high enough to paint the snow gold. But the warmth didn't reach me. My clothes were stiff with frost, my fingers numb, my mind stuck somewhere back up that mountain. The ranger, a man named Collins, stared at me when I stumbled through the door. Jesus, son, where the hell did you come from? He wrapped me in blankets, made me sit by the stove, poured me coffee that trembled in my shaking hands. I tried to explain about the cabin, the whispers, the people in the ice, but every word sounded more insane than the last. Collins just nodded slowly. You're not the first to say that, he murmured. Then he went quiet. That's when I noticed the wall behind him. Pinned there was a map of the mountains, dotted with red X's each marking a missing person. There were dozens. Maybe hundreds. All around the same area I'd camped. He caught me staring. They always think they can handle a night up there, he said. But that mountain doesn't forget. You disturb it, and it remembers. I left that day without another word. The drive back to Anchorage felt like it lasted years. I didn't even turn the radio on, too afraid I'd hear something other than static. But that night, in my motel room, I did. I woke to a faint humming sound coming from the vent. At first, I thought it was the heater, until I recognized the tone, the same low, rhythmic chant from the glacier. I froze. The air coming from the vent was ice cold. My breath fogged in front of me. Then I saw it, a small handprint forming in the condensation on the window. 5 long, bony fingers dragging slowly down the glass from the outside. I backed away, heart hammering, but when I turned toward the mirror above the sink, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My reflection was breathing out mist. And behind me, faintly, something was moving in the shadows. That same whispering voice crawled into my ear, soft and familiar. "You left us in the cold." The lights flickered. The mirror fogged over completely, and written in the condensation were 3 words. "We remember you." That was when I realized the truth. The mountain hadn't let me go. It had followed me. I don't sleep anymore. Not since I came down from that mountain. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, standing in the snow, surrounded by those frozen faces. They whisper, not words anymore, just sounds like the wind dragging through hollow bones. 3 nights ago, I started recording myself, hoping it would prove I'm not losing my mind. I thought maybe, if I caught the sounds, someone could explain them. Now, I wish I hadn't. The first night's recording was just static. A faint hum in the background, nothing more. The second night, I heard voices. My voice. Overlapping. Whispering things I never said. And last night, I heard something else. The tape starts normal. My breathing, the creak of the bed, the hum of the vent. Then, around 2:47 a.m., there's a knock, 3 slow, deliberate knocks, just like at the cabin. Knock. 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 And then, my voice again. But it wasn't me. It was colder. Hollow. Like something speaking through my lungs. It said, "We remember you." After that, the sound of wind. But I live in Anchorage. There was no wind that night. This morning, I found footprints in the hallway. Wet ones. They started at my door and led nowhere. I called Collins, the ranger. He didn't answer. So I drove back to the outpost. The snow had already started falling again. When I got there, the place was empty. The door half open. Inside, the map was gone. The stove was cold. But on the table, I found something new. A tape recorder. Still running. And from its speaker, faint and distant, I heard a voice. Mine. I shouldn't have come back. The wind outside began to rise. The same chant. The same frozen choir. I picked up the recorder and stepped outside. The snow was falling harder now, thick and soundless, swallowing the world whole. And there, at the tree line, stood those figures again, pale shapes, unmoving, watching. One of them lifted a hand and pointed at me. The ground beneath me cracked. Blue light seeped through. The whispering grew deafening. My skin burned with cold as I fell to my knees. The last thing I remembered before everything went white was my own voice whispering back to them. I remember you too. That recording was found 2 weeks later by a rescue team. No body was recovered. Just the recorder, still running, capturing the sound of the wind over the mountain. And faintly, beneath it, 100 voices singing in unison. The frozen choir had a new member.